But I wanted to take the opportunity to thank our panelists. I'm going to actually have them introduce themselves, and then we're going to dig deep into this question about why Carnegie. Cammie was very gracious to not talk a lot about community engagement and through the lens of the Carnegie Foundation. But one of the things I have a question about is like, how do we as institutions start to leverage this? And so this question, I guess, has been to other institutions. So Cammie had some expertise on this. So I'm going to let her lead the discussion. But before we do that, I'm just going to have kind of this way, Manuel kind of introduce herself, and then Rod, and then Jenna again. So we'll go ahead and get started, and then we'll let Cammie take the lead. Okay, go ahead, Manuel.
I will start?
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a good afternoon. My name is Manuel Montoya, and I am an associate professor here at UNM in our economics department. And I've been doing community engagement for quite a while.
Good afternoon. My name is Rod Williams. I'm the Vice Provost of Outreach and Engagement at Texas Tech, a position I've held for a whopping 10 months. Prior to that, I spent 3 decades at Purdue University, where I spent the last 7 years in the Provost office, charged principally with helping advance the scholarship of engagement as it relates to promotion and tenure.
My name is Lisa Schwartz. I'm a program manager at the City Boulder Office for Public and Community Engaged Scholarship.
Hi everyone, if you weren't at the first panel session, I'm Jenna. I'm with the University of Texas at Paso, and I'm the director with the Center for Community Engagement. Awesome. Okay, and I'm Cammie Jones-Friedrichs. I just did the keynote. And I'm going to transition now to the panel, which I love doing panels. And thank you to my colleagues who have all said yes to being on this panel. One of the top questions I get with doing this work is, why do this? Why go through this process? As I shared earlier, it takes a lot of work and time, but through this self-study, you really learn so much about your institutions and the best practices that you implement. And so I'm really happy that we'll be able to have this conversation today about your why, some best practices, how you communicate this work, how do you integrate community voice, and any tips you would like to share for folks who are about to cross over into this process. So with that being said, I'm going to get right into the first question. And the first question is really connected with the why. And I want each panelist to just share a little bit about their why behind their institution's applications for the community engagement classification. Why did you decide to pursue this process? And so I will first start with my friends over here, and then I cross over to there. So Lisa or Jenna? Okay.
I'm first again. Great.
Sorry, Jenna.
So UTEP was actually first classified, or we applied for classification in 2010, and then was reclassified in 2015, and then 2020, and now we're up for reclassification again in 2026. So this is our 4th cycle of applying for the application. And in the very beginning, the center, the one that I work for, believe it or not, I've been through all cycles. Okay? Giving my age away, but the center had just been restructured and repositioned to report to a department that was directly under the Provost office. Before that, we were under the College of Liberal Arts. And so when we were restructured, we were given a little bit more funding and resources to be able to explore our field. And we found out, that Carnegie was a really good way for us to do an assessment or an evaluation of where we were at our institution. And so we thought that was the best way to kind of start the center, was to apply, to look at the application. We honestly were very unsure if we would get classified, but thankfully we did, and from there we were able to use the application throughout our tenure at the university to again be that evaluation piece behind how are we doing, where we at, and then also to celebrate accomplishments as well through the work that our faculty, our community partners are doing together. And so, yeah, that's pretty much why we decided, or in the very beginning decided to. Why we continue to apply for it is a different story. I think now, since then, I think it's also more on the side of celebrating our accomplishments.
That's rare.
There is a huge difference between, you know, it was just 1 to 2 people that were working on the application the very first time, to now this year we have a whole writing team. And it's more, you know, known institution-wide. And so I think, again, it's built up to be an opportunity where everybody wants their hands in it to be able to show off or showcase what we're doing and how we're doing.
Well, that's great to hear. So at CU Boulder, we are just starting the process. We'll be applying in April. We have in the past, David Means, who is our director, did try and start the process years ago, and I think another professor had tried to start the process even longer ago. So what's exciting right now is that we have a new chancellor who wants us to go for it. So that's really what has changed. The why, all the things that Jenna just said and the things that you've been saying are really the why. And so we're really excited to, whether we get the classification or not, really get a chance to see, map what's happening, raise the profile, and connect with this new chancellor who really wants to elevate the work.
So before I get too far into the why for Texas Tech, I want to share with you a little bit of the history of engagement at Texas Tech. So over the last 10 years, we've had a series of what I would call spits and starts, where we've had about as many administrators with a partial appointment in engagement as we have in years. I'm the inaugural Vice Provost of Outreach and Engagement at Texas Tech, and I started January 2nd. 2 years ago, the Office of Outreach and Engagement had 2 people. We now have 115 as of this year. So we have 6 divisions within our unit, and so we have a lot of things that we're working on. And so everything that I'm going to share with you, just sort of keep that spits and starts, that sort of tumultuous history in mind as we start talking about Carnegie and look at it from that lens, because I think we're really picking up speed and inertia now more than we have in the past. So much like my colleagues on the left side of the room have said, we're using Carnegie as a scaffold so to help us frame all things O&E moving forward at Texas Tech. I've really worked hard with my team to leverage the scaffold within Carnegie to build out new initiatives, whether they be in community engaged learning, which has lapsed at Texas Tech since the last 3 years. It just came over to our office this spring when I arrived. We're also using it as leverage for our university strategic plan. I'm really excited. Right now we have 1/3 of the university strategic plan focused exclusively on outreach and engagement, which I think is a huge, huge win for us. And more recently, we have a brand new special advisor to our president. Our university is trying to create a 10-year pathway to AAU. And as part of that, we're really trying to link Carnegie and the underpinnings of Carnegie to support that pathway to AAU in terms of scholarship, engagement, engaged scholarship, and all the things that are embedded within the Carnegie classification. So that's the strategy that we're using at Texas Tech to leverage those resources moving forward.
I have no official position to speak on behalf of the university, so I'm going to just say this as an individual who has experienced the university administrative structure around community engagement for the better part of 7 or 8 years. And Tim, please back me up on any of these if you need me to. But I mean, initially, community engagement was housed in University College. It was a small staff, and the application process couldn't have been more than 2 or 3 people, as far as I understand, for that initial application that was done. But in terms of why UNM is going for this, it's been I've witnessed the university both grapple with its mission as a flagship university, but also as a university within a broad geographic expanse and an acknowledgement of several of the community and the community's issues that have been percolating for quite a long time. And in a lot of ways, those have been incongruent with the tenure and promotion processes of most of the faculty which creates this dissonance between what is actually research and what counts as research. And that discussion has manifested in several units across campus and has resulted in a provost level appointment in Tim Castillo, organizing a committee of which I am a part of, and several other members are here in the room, that are interested in creating the foundations or carrying on the work that was done in University College now with a larger umbrella to try to understand how community engagement can manifest for the community that we serve, while at the same time meeting the needs of the R1 traditions and requirements that have played out over 50, 60 years in an academy, which is something I'm interested in talking about further in a little bit if we can.
Well, thank you all so much for giving just a great breakdown of your institutions. I was happy to hear that, that's interesting. People are interested in the scaffolding piece, but also celebrating. I feel that our work should be acknowledged and celebrated. So I'm really happy to hear about that. And also, the gas when Ross at 115, I feel like I just want to have a conversation about that afterwards. That's just wonderful. And it also shows the development, evolution that this work can be when you have that support at your institution. And this kind of transitions to the next question. And we've heard from many institutions who have done this work, and I talked about this a little bit earlier in my keynote, that the process for applying, regardless of the outcome, it really is a deliberative, strategic exercise. As Ross said, is scaffolding. What can be done to help campuses strengthen and institutionalize community and civic engagement work? In fact, one of the goals for the 2026 application cycle is that an institution demonstrates a commitment and excellence of community engagement through systems and structures that are deep, pervasive, and integrative. Can each of you talk about what has changed at your institutions as a result of applying? I know some of you are reclassing, some are first time, but maybe even as a first time, you're starting to see the shift. What is happening as a result of you going through this process at your institution, whether that's strategic direction, communication, resources, especially as a minority serving institution? So instead of having Jenna go first, we'll start with Lisa, and then we'll cross over and then back to Jenna.
Sorry. Well, we are trying to use this as a scaffold to leverage creating the structures across our campus. We have a really federated campus, and one of our priorities is to work with different units on campus that have what's the best way to call them? They're sort of those high impact units. They're the high prestige units, the research and innovation office that gets a lot of funding, helps people get tenure and promotion, the Office of Government Relations that has a really close network with upper administration. So we're really working with these units in ways that we haven't before, and we're hoping to leverage that to create some structures as we're doing the Carnegie process, but also to develop structures for areas that we know we probably, whether we get the Carnegie or not, we really need to have more integration across campus in order to have this unified uplifting of this work in all these different areas. Hopefully that made sense.
Yeah. Rob?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we're good. No, you're fine.
Well, I think one of the first things that has stemmed from us is me sitting here. This very first position that we've had at the university, I think that sent a pretty strong signal to the faculty across Texas Tech that the provost and senior administration was serious about community engagement and willing to put some resources behind that. And then the growth in the outreach and engagement office is another testament that faculty have obviously seen that. And the results that we've been able to accomplish over the last 10 months. And I'll share a couple of those with you. As I mentioned, Community Engaged Learning, which was formerly called Service Learning at Texas Tech, has recently come into my office. Again, received some support from senior administration to hire a faculty fellow. We're now in the processes of trying to create a course designation that we can track highly effectively by thinking about designation or elective classification in the future. We had a course designation at Texas Tech 3 years ago, before my arrival, and those 3 people have since left the university, and with them all that institutional knowledge. So there is nothing written down on how they did that. So if anybody has any course designation for service learning or community engaged learning, please talk to me afterwards, because we're trying to reinvent the wheel here. We did have some great conversations with some folks in Eastern Tennessee State University who just did this as well, so we'd love to hear from some more of you. So we're launching that. We're also launching full bore into promotion and tenure, which is what I'm most familiar with, and I'll share most of that for the session this afternoon. But we're focusing a lot of effort and resources on that. We all recognize how that opens pathways for faculty to pursue this. Something else that we're doing that might be a little different is 3 months after I arrived at Texas Tech, I applied for an NSF-funded program called Advancing Research Impact in Society, ARIS. Anybody here hear of ARIS? So it's an NSF-funded program that really focuses on helping organizations enhance their societal impact capacity. So thinking about community engagement, it's another term for community engagement. We were then selected with 6 other institutions, so we're in a cohort right now for 2 years with MIT, Penn State, University of Minnesota, Utah State, University of Utah, and Texas Tech. So for the next 2 years, we're working collaboratively with those 5 institutions, but we've also partnered with our Institutional Research and Innovation Office, the VPR's office, to really strengthen the linkages between outreach and engagement and our research arm so that we can work collaboratively to really make sure that on the very front end of faculty research proposals, we're integrating O&E early on, purposely, strategically, so that we can try to produce some engaged scholarship on the back end. So that's another major initiative that we've done. We've also, from that, launched a graduate certificate program. That's one of my charges. I spent 20 years at my previous institution teaching courses on graduate engagement. We're trying to launch a graduate certificate program at Texas Tech to foster the next generation of engaged scholars. So that's another level of support that didn't exist until we scaffolded it in this way. And the last thing I'll share is we just launched an engaged college program. This is 5 of our 13 colleges across campus who have self-identified of wanting to integrate engagement into the culture of their colleges. And so we're working with each of the individual colleges in that regard too. So just a couple of the initiatives that we've launched at Texas Tech under the guise of the Carnegie and elective classification.
I'm gonna have to apologize and go in a different direction here, just because I'll yield to Tim on any of the institutional configurations historically that occur. But I'll make an observation about what I've seen evolve. As I've sat on these committees, both in University College and now in this provost level committee, one of the things that I have observed is that we're dealing with a very subtle and nuanced problem about disciplinarity. And one of the observations I make whenever I'm hearing conversations about how Carnegie is an important threshold for universities is that it gives places that have interdisciplinarity and who embrace interdisciplinarity, it gives it some sort of point of reference and even external validity to be able to operate within some of the disciplinary-based traditions that occur within a university. And the reason I say that is because when you have a discipline that is well established, and I'm not going to pick on the technosciences, but I'm going to pick on the technosciences. Like if you have well established peer review guidelines and you have standards of excellence for how you produce research and how you develop your intellectual inquiry, the more disciplinary that tradition becomes, the more institutional memory you're able to retain. And the more institutional memory you're able to retain, the more barriers you may have to community in coming in. Whereas I've observed where interdisciplinary programs, often ethnic studies, often honors colleges and honors programs, other places where there's more of an openness to disciplinary and research productivity, you don't have as much institutional memory at hand because you're not contributing or you're not participating in the same way that this long tradition happens nationally, locally, state, and vertically. It's more fluid and more plastic than that. But the thing that happens is that people feel more comfortable engaging with those units on campus, and you see a lot more community engagement. So you also see embedded inside of this logic a problem of institutional memory being almost even a barrier to entry for community to feel comfortable engaging and access. And that's something that I think writ large the university has tried very hard to address and is trying to change the vocabulary for how that plays out.
I'm just gonna, well, one of the things that in my role, and this is a year in few months being in this role. I think that the provost has really taken a strong initiative in community engagement and really trying to apply resources to really create a place. I think that we've been in a very similar place where we've had one or two people leading the effort to do the report. But I think in my role, I'm trying to develop a notion of sustainability for this practice, and really thinking about the data collection, which is super important. We've never really had that implemented, so we are actually tracking that internally now. And then I say the being able to host something like this and be able to learn from others, I think it is really, we're never going to be at 160, but that's something to aspire to, I suppose. But again, we have wonderful colleagues like Manuel who lend a great voice to championing this work forward. And I think that the one thing that's really great is that being in academic affairs now, that we do have some leverage point in that arena. So I think we're definitely looking at something a little bit more sustainable for the future.
I would agree that, it really did bring validity to the work that faculty are doing and that we at the center are doing. And through that, I think we've been able to grow institution-wide, whereas before it was a center that was doing engagement programming to where we're a resource center for the entire institution and for the community as well. And so, but it took some time. It took a lot of time for us to kind of build and get there, because in the early stages, like in 2010, 2015, it was very difficult to feel like we accomplished something big. I think back then we were given a certificate and that was it. And congratulations by the provost. It wasn't really anything, and like I say, we've moved to the point where it's more celebrated, and that's great. We're doing, again, institution-wide efforts where we have this council of representatives across the institution, 2 members from across the institution, that kind of drives engagement initiatives across the institution, which include the designation for the courses. We have one college, a College of Liberal Arts, that did really well in creating this designation within their college. It's this Community Engaged Leadership designation. We're now going to expand that institution-wide so that every college, every faculty within every college is able to apply that designation to their courses. We also have, down to space, where we're located now. Before, we were located in the middle of campus. It was very difficult for community to get to us, find parking. And now we're off campus where we have our own little casita and we have our parking, and we can host faculty. That want to meet with their partners. We can host partners whenever we'd like to. And so it's really nice to be in the community and accessible for community members. And then, of course, more staff roles. We went from an office of 2 to a full-time staff to now 6 of us, including faculty fellows, 2 faculty fellows, as I mentioned. 3 now, I get, little funding here and there to be able to offer faculty some fellowships to work on specific projects. So like the CL designation, we'll have 1 faculty just work with us this year on that. And then lastly, a really cool opportunity, and you'll hear our faculty fellow who's here with us is going to be on the promotion and tenure panel. We were awarded through the regions, the UT regions, a senior faculty member to be able to hire a senior faculty professor that would take a lead in community engagement within our institution, so that we can now focus more efforts on mentoring, providing resources, and training within the community engaged scholarship area, and having the tenure promotion process be considered to incorporate and recognize faculty for their community engaged scholarship. And so it's been really neat how I've been able to witness that transition from 2 staff, And then now, being offered an endowed position through the UT Regents, that's really gonna, I think, uplift our work at the institution.
This is great. Wow. Like, I love just hearing all these wonderful examples. I was taking so many notes. Just great to hear about the evolution of this work. And so we focus a lot about scaffolding on campus. One of the things I mentioned in my keynote is that we've noticed that there's a gap sometimes in regards to how we communicate and engage with our partners. And so I want to transition a little bit and focus on them for a second. And I was curious if you can share a little bit about how your campus communicates with external stakeholders or potential partners, and maybe even peer institutions about your community engaged work. Can you share what applying for and receiving this classification has done to the way you tell your story to community engagement partners or networks in the field externally? And for those that are like first time, even just talking about how you explain this work and the evolution that you just shared just now with your community partners would be helpful, because we feel that one of the things we're going to be exploring a little bit more is just this gap in regards to community voice and mutual reciprocity. Though we use it a lot in our field and in our definitions, it is definitely a space for growth in the field, I must admit. So with that being said, I'll actually start on this side first. So Rod and Manuel, one of you want to go
Please.
first?
No, you
And then
go,
we'll cross
please.
back over.
I
I'm
insist.
just trying to make sure Jenna doesn't go first all the time. So like, some crossover here.
My answer will be pretty succinct, because to say that there's a lot of work left in this space is an understatement at Texas Tech. So we do communicate some of our successes, some of our community engaged work with our stakeholders, but I would say we do it on a disciplinary basis. We do not do it holistically in any structured way at all. And we haven't started working on that just yet. We're trying to figure out how to make the internal processes work so that we can communicate those internal processes externally. So we just really haven't made any real progress in that space other than what, we've got 6 divisions in my unit, and each of our divisions will do that, but we don't, because we have control over that structure.
Yeah.
We don't yet have a great systematic approach to do that to university level. We are reaching out to our engaged colleges. I think Jenna, in our Engagement Associate Dean Council that Jenna was mentioning that she has at UTEP, we have the same thing, and I'm starting to lean on them very heavily for strategies that each of those colleges are doing, so we can pick the BMPs from each of those colleges and try to scale that up to some sort of university level messaging that will be relevant to our stakeholders outside of the academy. So that's where we are. We have a lot of work to do, so I'm all ears on this one.
Yeah, the challenge of institutional memory is a broad and complicated one. How does an institution like a Research One Institute acknowledge and celebrate all of its moving parts? I don't know if I have a good answer to that. I can say that I've observed that through this new initiative to develop an Office of Community Engagement here, you've seen more alignment with other ways in which those forms of community engagement are rewarded. For example, the deeper connection now between the Community Engaged Research Award that is offered here annually and the way that connects now to the Office of Community Engagement. The interactive map that was developed recently that tries to highlight, at least as a public portal, tries to identify some sort of public-facing way of articulating all the ways that we acknowledge community engagement. And also the way that our media responsiveness is also, I think, more attuned to this than it ever has before, largely because the discussion has been happening consistently around community engagement. So I do think even in its nascent form, I think UNM has always had community engagement and has always had a rich connection with community, but they're all parallel systems. And I think that also maps onto the work that people do with communities who are marginalized within the state, who are also, it's very difficult to acknowledge some of the challenges that they face. So that it's kind of a double system of alterity that's being playing out in this challenge.
Do you want to?
I'll grab this. I think one of the things that we've been doing is really thinking about that communication. And so this year I was able to hire a media graduate student. So we've been working a lot in trying to tell stories. So being able to create short snippets of our faculty and our staff that are doing tremendous work in the space of community, and going out into those communities and filming that, and then producing YouTube documentaries of those. But also internally, with academic affairs and being able to have a voice at the table and being able to communicate with the deans and the senior vice provost and the provost is really important. So being able to tell that story and really gain some traction in being able to, for others to understand the impact that we have in the institution. And I think finally just sort of aligning with our master plan for the future in the 2040, and just really aligning with advancing New Mexico and really thinking about how community engagement plays a significant role in that is really part of some of the things that we're trying to do.
Thank you. Oops. When I first saw this question, I was like, do they even care? I don't know if they even are community partners, right? They're so busy.
Yeah.
They're doing a lot of great work. They need the help. I don't even know if our community partners know what Carnegie classification means sometimes, So I was like, I don't know. I mean, other than trying to get them to help us answer the survey on the on the application right before. But I think what's really different about UTEP is that we're serving our community.
Yeah.
They're students, so if our students feel like they are at an institution that's really going to impact their lives and impact the communities that they're in, that's, I think, the best way for us to kind of tell our story through our students, because they'll go home, they'll let their parents know, they'll encourage their siblings, they'll encourage, others within their own communities to understand that, we have a great resource here in our community that really does provide access to excellent education. And so telling that story, I think, was a little bit challenging at first. Even, through the Carnegie application, it was difficult at the beginning to figure out a way for us to tell that type of story, because the application wasn't kind of set up that way for us to demonstrate, our mission is community engaged. Like, what we do is community engagement. And so I think we've gotten, again, to the point where we're able to demonstrate that and kind of show how it's really embedded and pervasive across the university. I think right now what we really need to work on is awareness and the language that we use around community engagement. It's different for everybody, right, in different fields. And so having faculty recognize that this is community engagement, having community partners recognize, oh, you have a student from an academic-based community engagement course, or oh, you have an intern, that is part of the university, so really looking at language and awareness now to show that, this is what it's called, this is what we're doing, and it's working, and we're doing a great job.
Well, I feel like this could be answered in a lot of ways. And, but I was really excited to see this question because it's an area that I'm really interested in. Just telling the stories and having the stories being told from multiple perspectives. And also having stories, an earlier panelist was talking about having different modalities to tell the stories, not just in journal articles, but blogs, all these different ways that we can share. And I think when we broaden that, then you can have different kinds of authorship. Some things that we do already is, as Jeannie showed earlier, we have this community, I call it a database, but for the rest of people viewing it, it's a programs page where they can see in different parts of the state or on different topics the work that people are doing in Colorado to serve communities. And we also are really blessed to have an amazing communications team that doesn't just work for our office, but is really their purview is for the entire campus to be telling outreach and engagement stories. And so we've always had folks on that team that are uplifting the faculty and the staff, but that also go out and talk to the community members and have their voice in those articles. With that said, I do think there's a lot of room to grow. And I'll just say one last thing, some projects that I've been working on in the past few years. a project where we partnered community-based artists with scientists at CU, and really the artists led the programming, and I found it really powerful. And I think in times in the past, I would have felt like, oh, I'm not really supposed to have those artists be representing the university, but we just kind of let that go.
Mm-hmm.
And I just provided a lot of opportunities for them to present at academic conferences, at more community-based conferences, to be the spokespeople at things in their communities or opening events. So they really were representing, they were the experts, the community folks, but connected to the university. And I think that was really powerful. The scientists who were involved really appreciated that. And I'd like to see more of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I really love that, the asset-based engagement that you're talking about, and the artists. I think another thing that was really interesting that was brought up is, yeah, our field can sometimes be confusing with the different terms that we use and language. Yeah, someone was talking about that on the panel. Sorry, I just had like a light bulb moment. It's like coming full circle with what we were talking about this morning, and the importance of language in this field and how that can lead to awareness and understanding of this work. So thank you for all bringing that to the space and being vulnerable about the work that we all still, including us at AC and Carnegie, have to do to communicate. Like, we also are trying to grow and develop and figure out, like you said, the different modalities to tell the story. I love that piece. This next question is, well, for those who went through the process, but everyone's going through the process. So I think you all can talk about this from different perspectives. Going back to the classification, can you share one of the most challenging aspects of the community engagement classification process? And also some rewarding things, which you all have kind of sort of talked about a little bit, but I'm going to start with Jenna. Now we're back to you about like the challenging aspects, but also some rewarding things about going through this process. Like, what did you discover? What did you learn? What were your aha moments?
Great. I think, so the recognition of being Carnegie classified has been great because we have people are more aware of us, and we're seen as more of a resource for everyone, but I feel like we're still not there yet with the resources that have been given to us to be able to continue to do the great work. So I think one of the things that has happened is the awareness of the center, has all faculty know about it, and a lot of grants nowadays, at least the larger ones, are requiring some community engagement component. And we'll get faculty all the time that'll come to the center and be like, we need your help, we need a letter of support, give us a letter of support, we want to work with you. And we would do that, here and there, but I started to realize, wait, there's too many. It's a lot of coming through. I don't know if we have the capacity to commit to all of this work if all these grants come through. We need to figure out a way for faculty to understand that we need the support.
Yeah.
To be able to build the capacity to help them with these efforts now. And so we're working through that process at the center and with the council that we have to figure out a way. We're also working with our VPR and Research and Innovation Office to offer some training workshop to faculty members as far as what does it mean to partner with the center. It's not just asking for a letter of support. There's more that goes to it. And give examples of how it works. And then also to, as simple as like, when faculty submit a notice of intent to apply for a grant, just indicating, is there going to be a community engagement component? Is there going to be a community partnership component? So that we're more aware of, what is happening. I don't think we have a good handle on that now, but it's become so, I hate to say the word popular, or so, much that is happening that it's hard to keep track of now a little bit. And rewards, let's see, I talked a lot about rewards. I'll have to, because I said them all. I mean, I feel like I've been talking a lot about good stuff that has been happening at UTAP.
All the good things.
Well, I think, it's related to some of the things you just said about not always having a good handle and it becoming very popular for people. When we're doing this process, and back to language, what do people understand as doing this work? We support a really wide range of that understanding, and we help people understand where they fall on that, but Carnegie doesn't actually support as wide of a range as we do. We're public and community scholarship.
Yep.
And so I think that's also when people do grants, that comes into play as well. As I mentioned before, a challenge for us is that we're really not, we're a very federated institution, and so getting everyone together to coordinate and integrate and have some more centralized structure is a big challenge, but also could be very rewarding. I think that would be a huge reward if this came through, or just the process of collaboration. That's what Community Engaged Scholarship, the process over the product, right? So I think that process is really going to be a reward for us.
Yeah, we always say the process is the prize. That's our tagline.
Okay, I'll steal that.
Thank you.
Sure. I think it's twofold. On the community side, it's the big challenge that I've observed is that problem of authorship that was discussed earlier. I mean, it's very easy for communities to appear as research subjects within the archives of research that we produce in the academy, but to what degree are those voices amplified, not only as authors, but as not just subjects that sit in a museum for all time, right? Mm-hmm. They're active voices that are part of the discussion. And I've seen some really cool projects at UNM that do that, right? Architecture and planning. They do a lot of really wonderful projects with the community where it's the voice of the community members that is really front and center on this, and it's more of an amplification or an uplifting of those voices. But the bigger challenge that I see and observe is on the traditions within the academy side of things, right? Which is people who are used to a certain way of research excellence and defining research excellence, and how does that then become a transformative process within universities to transform what we call excellence within a university. And that's actually, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, this is one of the main reasons that the Carnegie designation is so important and vital to UNM, because it's one of these ways of connecting and magnifying what is locally done and what these community voices are, not just as research subjects, but as really meaningful and examples of excellence in research that can be shown in the transformative process.
So I'm probably going to give a lot more pragmatic response to that question. So I've had the opportunity, I use that word lightly, opportunity to be involved in reclassification at 2 R1 institutions in the last 18 months. My former institution was starting on this when I left for Texas Tech, and across the board, it's garnering that institutional data that's required to support the claims that we put in the document. The first time I went to the ARIS program and met with my colleagues across the country, the first question I ask is, what processes do you have in place to garner that institutional data? Mm-hmm. Silence. And so that's I think that's the issue, right? Because when you pull your team together to start accessing this data, there's small pockets of data that's deep, but there's tremendous data that's very, very shallow and incomplete. And it just really makes me nervous when I'm trying to pull that institutional data. There are programs out there that help you collect institutional data, but getting the institution to utilize that resource and input that data in meaningful and structured ways where we could pull it and make sense of that is something altogether different. So that's the biggest challenge. But a good reward through the process is when you do that very intentional digging, you oftentimes find all these hidden gems in terms of stories and messaging that you didn't know existed, because you've got this new team that's very diverse and probably atypical than what would typically be in an O&E office doing investigation and sharing information and insights that they have in their particular discipline. So that's been rewarding as well.
Yeah.
I also agree. That's one of our struggles right now is data collection, and so we've set up some mechanisms to do that. Mm-hmm. But I think one of the things that's really interesting is the support that I'm getting from the deans. So we got a whole new set of deans, not across the board, but about 4, and they all have been very committed to community engagement. So that's been having that advocacy in the schools and colleges is really making my work a lot easier. But I think it's really, also trying to think about the data as an institutional endeavor, right? So being able to, over time, be able to collect this. So again, there are databases, but one thing that we did set up was our academic program review. Started to collect, this next year we'll have community engagement data folded into from each department, which is something that we're excited to have for the future.
Yeah. Wow. Being mindful of time, I'm just going to do like a simple last words from each panelist before we transition to the audience if you have any questions. So for the panelists here, are there any final thoughts or words of encouragement, tips, or things you'd like to share with folks who are going through this process? Jenna, you're like, yes. Okay.
At times when I get nervous about the application and putting our answers together, and I start freaking out because I'm like, I don't know what to answer in this one question, or we're not really doing that. I remember that it's not about, it's not about like how much you're doing or numbers or, the application is not meant for that. It's more like, what are you doing, right? And if you answer the question honestly and truthfully, with even if you're working towards, something at your institution, write about what you're working towards. Just because you're not doing it doesn't mean that that your institution isn't community engaged, right? So really thinking about it is my institution community engaged? Yes, okay, well then, answer the questions in that way, not necessarily in a way where you feel like you have to come up with a certain number of partnerships or a certain number of, it's more like, is your institution doing it? And if so, just tell that story, And if not, then tell a story about how you want to work towards it, right? Or what are the plans to work towards it? And that's your answer, but I think it still shows that your institution is community engaged.
Love it. You just answered a question. Thanks, Jenna. No, it is true. I share that a lot with colleges all the time. Just don't get deep in the weeds with one word in a question. Really lean into your season of engagement and who you are. The application is not a competition. We don't compare the applications either, which is really important. That's why we have that reviewer process now where peers of the field are a part of it. So I always say, Jenna's right, lean into your story of who you are. Don't write something that's not factual or true and not who you are. The reviewers will know because of the training that they get. So just lean into your story. Yeah. Sorry, Beck. Anyone else?
Yeah, I just have a question for one other, because I want to listen and learn now.
Okay. Anyone else?
I just finished teaching class this morning, and I'm tired, but I'm also really energized because every time I listen to their beautiful minds go in different creative directions, I recognize that the people that come to college and that invest at great risk and expense to themselves, they come here and they take a chance on moving into the next path of their journey. And often the families that send them off or the people that they come from, they often see that as a permanent farewell. And I think community engagement is also about making sure that process is not a unidirectional process, right? And I was reminded of that this morning by some special students. Just wanted to share that with you guys.
Wow, that's amazing.
And oftentimes, when I talk about this, I get asked, well, why is that important to X institution to be identified in that way? And I always say, for Texas Tech, for example, we became an R1 in 2016 and an HSI in 2019. And we're very proud of both of those things. And And we're now striving for AAU, and I just had this conversation with our senior leadership. I said, well, we're very proud of those because those show through our peers and peer review that we've attained some level of rigor to reach those classifications, and it's no different with the Carnegie classification either. So we need to be equally proud of the fact that we've been recognized by a panel of our peers to achieve a certain level of rigor that we are in fact an engaged institution. And that serves pretty well to put it in that perspective for our institution.
Yeah. Awesome. Wow. Thank you all so much. We have a few minutes for questions from the audience. Anyone have any questions? Thoughts? Oh, you have a question.
Wait,
A
so
panelist?
no, well,
Oh, I was like, a
let
panelist
David
has a
go.
question? Wait.
Yeah.
So, wait, who has a question?
David.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, oh, your boss?
Yeah.
Oh.
Let him go.
Okay.
Sorry, that was an aside. She wasn't supposed to yell that out.
Sorry.
Is this off the
Oh.
record?
It's late today.
Is this off the record?
Sorry.
So, yeah, I was like, oh, yes.
So, I was just gonna ask, in terms of pursuing Carnegie classification, at your institutions, did you all have conversations about the opportunity cost in terms of other ways you could have spent the time and resources?
That's a good
And
question.
who needed to be convinced, if anyone? And
Yeah.
the opportunity cost questions
Yep.
I think is interesting.
Very pertinent to us right now. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think, David, that pretty much goes in line with what I was just talking about that we did, but it was really multifaceted. So we had to convince senior leadership, so the provost and the president at one of my institutions, which will remain unnamed, but it's not the one I'm at now. And we also had to convince some of the committee members. They wanted to know what is the purpose for us serving, because it's not a minor lift for the folks who are assigned or who are recruited to be on those committees to do all of that heavy lifting. And so I think we had to convince both of those. So some of our faculty colleagues who were doing the work and the senior administration who had to support the allocation of that time.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, if I may, I actually do think in reference to one of the things I said earlier, the opportunity cost is largely and almost primarily with the orthodox way of doing things. And so if you have people who are really pushing for a high standard of excellence in the way that they're defining excellence, and there's a lot of time being spent to redefine what those terms of excellence are, there's always going to be a perceived high opportunity cost in that regard. And so the institution is really kind of struggling with that internally, right? Because it's being pulled in this natural way toward community, while at the same time it's being pulled back and inside by these other standards. And everybody feels very powerfully and strongly about that.
That's a good point, yeah. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Veronica Plaza. I have a question. Part of the community engagement is to know who we serve. And part of that, at least in New Mexico as well as in Texas, large part of our population are Spanish speakers. And so is in that criteria bilingual education, a number of bilingual courses offered at the university as part of the criteria used for the classification, or in your experience of other universities, how they report that?
That is a really interesting question. So we don't ask for bilingual courses specifically, but one of the things that we do ask, we actually have a curricular section in the application, and we have everyone's favorite curricular table, and I'm being funny about that because people don't like it, but I think it's important at certain points. And in this table, it allows for you to give us a breakdown in regards to not only how many undergraduate courses you provide, but also graduate courses. We don't ask for specific designations, but you do have a question following up after breaking down the numbers or the stats of the courses that you provide, with what those look like, the diversity of those courses, who is a part of that process, how it's led to an evolution. So in a lot of ways, this is actually a gap in the application. We don't ask for that specifically. We do know that is important, but more than anything, we give institutions the opportunity to share that story. So we keep some of our questions in the curricular section broad so they can open up the opportunity for you to lean in and tell us that story. And if we start to see in the field that, wow, okay, there's a lot of institutions that are talking about bilingual education and bilingual courses, like maybe that is a space that we need to delve into a little bit further. And it may not be with the application, that may translate to our research collabs. And we're like, okay, that's a new space in community engagement that we need to focus on, and it's because our minority serving institutions have let us know that this is important. So I would say we give you the space to tell us that. We just ask generally about courses, but it doesn't mean that it can be an opportunity for us to do further research, and then figure out ways to implement it within the application. One of the things that we are trying to do a better job with, so thinking about partners, we have like a community partner survey. And so the community partner survey is in English and Spanish as well. And we're hoping that if institutions think it's needed, do we need to have the application also in English and Spanish? So these are the questions that we're asking, but we wait for the field to tell us like what those needs are and how we can better evolve in this space. So I think it's a space for us to grow in.
Especially for those universities that are Hispanic serving.
Yeah.
Have the Hispanic serving institution designation, you know.
Yeah.
One thing is to be a Spanish serving, another thing is Spanish involving.
Yeah.
And, you know, kind of like another way to approach that is also to look into how's that engagement for those Hispanic serving institutions.
Yeah, most definitely. Thank you so much for bringing that to my attention. If there's other thoughts and ideas and things we need to be considering in application, the next one is in 2029. And so this is the type of feedback that we need so that we can continue to grow and evolve in this work. For those who are going through the 2026 process, there's a reflection section. And that's the section I like to read because that's when everyone just let it rip, basically, and just say, this is what was missing. Or these questions are redundant, or that wasn't needed. So you also, I don't know if you're on a campus that's going through this process, but there is a space for you to tell us where there may be gaps. And we definitely want to hear that, especially after going through a revision process in 2026. So please utilize section 10 in that reflection piece and let us know what your thoughts are and how we can do it better.
Well, I think that's,
Okay.
yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Yeah. We're like, yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I want to thank our panelists and give them a round of applause. We're going to take a 15-minute break, and then we'll come back with panel 3.